Crowds shout Hosanna, religious leaders tighten their grip, and Jesus strides straight into the temple to confront everything that has gone wrong. Mark 11 begins with a king riding into Jerusalem, but not the kind of king anyone expected. Good morning, and welcome back to The Late Disciple. Today, we continue our conversation of Jesus' journey to, and now, entry into Jerusalem, where Mark shares the story of the cleansing of the temple, cursing of the fig tree, and more. As we explore this chapter of Mark, we'll highlight the differences between his and Matthew's gospel, sometimes subtly, and sometimes more meaningfully. As always, our goal is to see the disciples' journey of faith and understanding unfold before us. As we transition to chapter 11, Jesus approaches Jerusalem. He instructs two disciples to fetch a colt that has never been ridden, a detail unique in Mark. In Jewish tradition, animals never ridden were considered holy and reserved for kings. Jesus' choice signifies his rightful claim as the Messiah. Exactly as predicted by Jesus, the disciples face a minor challenge in securing the colt when someone asks them, why are they taking their donkey? As directed, they tell the man that Jesus has need of the animal and it will soon be returned, a subtle detail absent in Matthew's account. Jesus then rides into Jerusalem and the city is stirred, shouting, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Jesus enters the city and the temple, but after looking around, he goes to Bethany to rest due to the lateness of the hour. This is a departure from Matthew, in which the cleansing of the temple occurs immediately upon his arrival. The next day, Jesus notices a fig tree in full leaf, but bearing no fruit. In Mark, he says, May no one ever eat fruit from you again. Unlike Matthew, the story is told in two stages: observation now, and later the lesson, with the two stages interrupted by the events of Jesus cleansing the temple. But we're going to discuss both here. This is a bit of a botanical curiosity. In the culture of first century Palestine, fig trees should bear fruit when in full leaf, and this commonly occurs before they are normally in season. By observing that the fig tree is bearing leaves, Jesus has every expectation that he should find figs here. Just as on my first reading, when I felt Jesus was taking out his frustration on the fig tree, so have some Christian naysayers who point this out as an example of Jesus acting in anger. But once again, we should consider both the specific circumstances and the time period in which this scenario plays out. Jesus, among other things, was a prophet. One of the most common forms of prophetic communication in the Old Testament was the object lesson. The prophet would take something from nature or everyday life, and from that, craft a lesson. Here, Jesus found an object that illustrated the sin of hypocrisy. It had the appearance of fruitfulness, but it was actually barren. We see Jesus repeatedly denouncing hypocrisy, most frequently in the attitudes of the religious leaders. This was the lesson for the disciples, as well as us. Mark also adds an important note about prayer. Forgiving others is inseparable from effective prayer. Jesus stresses, and whenever you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father also who is in heaven may forgive your trespasses. Backing up now, back to verses 15 through 19, Jesus enters the temple, and he drives out the merchants there buying and selling, overturning tables and disrupting commerce. Mark uniquely emphasizes that the temple is a house of prayer for everyone. It was a huge complex and divided into four parts: the court of the Gentiles, the court of the women, the court of the Jews, and the Holy of Holies. Yeah, there was specifically an area set aside for Gentiles. Even before Jesus, God had called upon the Jewish people to be a blessing to all nations. The Gentile area was the outer perimeter, and it was here that the Sadducees and the Sanhedrin had turned into a stockyard for commercial purposes. So, not only had they turned the temple from a place of prayer and worship into a money-making commercial enterprise, It was seemingly done at the deliberate expense of the Gentile population, inhibiting their ability to learn of and worship God. As if Jesus needed another reason, this certainly contributed to his cleansing of the temple. As in Matthew, the chief priests, scribes, and elders approached Jesus and, in an attempt to discredit him, questioned the authority behind his actions, particularly his disruption of the temple. Unique to Mark, when Jesus redirects their challenge with one of his own, asking under whose authority did John the Baptist act, he aggressively adds, "Answer me." Jesus, now on the offense, directly challenges and exposes their lack of courage and faith. Compared to Matthew, this additional dialogue emphasizes his authority and the moral bankruptcy of the religious leaders. In Mark 11, Jesus doesn't whisper his mission, he announces it. He comes as king, judge, and teacher, exposing fruitlessness both in the fig tree and in the temple. But he also comes as the one who calls his followers to pray boldly, forgive freely, and trust God without hesitation. As we sit with this chapter, we're invited to ask, is there fruit in our lives? Are we living out the kind of faith that Jesus expects? And do our actions match the confession we shout when the King enters our lives? Thank you for joining me today on The Late Disciple. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might be curious or even struggling with their faith. Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, keep walking with Christ. And as always, remember, we are all disciples. It is never too late.